Well, Will,
Hey,
we're pretty much to the end of the year, and this is going to be the last episode of Swamp Talk. Last episode of Swamp Talk in 2023. I know it's a sad day, but
terrible.
the holidays are coming up. Got to be eating a lot of really good food, spending time with our families. Yeah, I'm going to miss you, man, but we'll be back. We'll be back stronger than ever in 2024.
Wow.
But of
That
course,
sounds weird to say. That sounds weird to say.
But of course-
2024.
yeah, but we've still got one more episode to get done, so let's make it a good one.
Make it a doozy.
Last week, the Blades got a doozy of a win on Friday
Yes, they
against
did.
the South Carolina Stingrays. Unfortunately, lost the games Wednesday and then in overtime lost on Saturday night on Teddy Bear Toss night. Plenty of places to start, Will. Where do we want to go?
I think you should definitely start with Friday's performance and kind of the way that shook out. It was probably we've talked a lot about games that we think are the best performances of the season.
Oh, yeah.
We said that road win in Orlando a couple weeks ago was probably the best road performance of the season. I would argue that bar none, this was just the best performance of the team all around. Defense was great. Offense was really clicking. Mark Sendon had 2 goals. Cam Johnson with the shutout. I mean, it was just a really strong way to come back after a tough loss Wednesday night. And then just to put that performance on, have the shutout, have the clean sheet, 4 goals in a game is always solid, and really, knock off a team that had been up to that point extremely well. The Stingrays had won 5 or 6 straight going into that game.
5 straight games, and they had averaged just under 6 goals a game before Cam Johnson shut them out with 34 saves. Also the best start to a game, bar none, for the Blades this season. 2-0 lead after the first period. The first time all year the Blades have had a multi-goal lead after the opening 20 minutes. Certainly, I agree with you. I think it was the strongest performance of the Blades this season. Certainly, in my mind, the strongest home performance of the season for Florida. It's a shame because I've talked about it with some people. You kind of wish you could swap the result from Friday and Saturday so you'd have that game be the Teddy Bear Toss game. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Wednesday, I would say, was a pretty nondescript game. It was a South Carolina team that was still on their heater roll. Mm-hmm. Sort of, I don't know if imposing their will on Florida is the right way to put it, but you could tell Florida wasn't quite completely recovered from the trip up to Adirondack and the travel back, whereas South Carolina, with more energy on their side, just had the extra step.
Yeah, you could still kind of see it in that Adirondack trip from the stories that we heard was pretty grueling. A lot of time up, a lot of time down. So understandable that the guys might have some heavy legs going into that game. But I still think for the most part, even though that game is going to go down as a loss in the record books, the team can still be proud of the way that they skated with South Carolina.
Yeah, for
Again,
sure.
one of the best teams in the entire ECHL.
It was a hard fought loss, no doubt.
No doubt. Yeah. I think there were some positive takeaways, even though didn't get the best hand drawn to them.
Probably the more positive takeaway would be the way they carried it into Friday and got better results to go along with their process. Saturday, Teddy Bear Toss, it was still a really fun night. It always is. The sold-out crowd, the energy in the building, all that stuff feels great. Just unfortunate, the Blades, they lose 2-1 in overtime. The goal comes in the third period. The Bears had already been tossed onto the ice. For anyone who doesn't know, if the Blades in a Teddy Bear Toss game are scoreless after 2 periods and the Bears get thrown on during the second period intermission.
That didn't stop some fans, though, from holding on to him.
A couple fans held
Chris
on to him.
Ortebody's
Yeah,
goal.
a little bit of a Teddy Bear Toss goal for Chris Ortebody, but still, it did not have the same pomp and circumstance as it would have if that goal came just 1 period earlier. And it is unfortunate. Normally, we are not going to talk about the emotions of a game. We're more the X's and O's, the kind of like this wasn't working for the team, right? You talk about that kind of stuff, the neutral zone play, the special teams, whatever. That was a game where if that goal comes in the second period, I think Florida wins just from how much of an emotional jolt it would have given the entire building.
No, absolutely. And I think you could really feel, and I really felt, especially in the first period, any puck that came close to the cage, the fans were, every opportunity was just getting emphasized, and there was punctuation on everything, and you could tell that the guys were skating for their lives in the first and second period. They were really, really trying to get that goal.
First, there was a period where they were all over them.
Yeah.
I
thought for sure they were going to score in the first.
There was one where Benton Mass for South Carolina blocked a sure goal from Nathan Staios. Was probably the underrated play of the game. South Carolina, they played a really strong road game, and they knew they wanted to get the crowd out of that one, and they did, which is unfortunate. And then you get into overtime, it's 3-on-3, and stuff like that will happen.
Unlucky
Unfortunately,
bounds,
Blades right now
charge.
0-4 in OT this year. They do have a shootout win back in the season opener against Orlando, but it's not going to hurt you right now, but certainly it does sting leaving those 4 points on the board.
Yeah. There's and I think that's going to be the main takeaway from Teddy Bear Toss Night. It's obviously a great event, great charity support, goes to helping out a lot of kids locally in the area.
Yeah, but for the guys on the ice, it's a hockey game.
Exactly. And I think when they look back on it, it's like damn, we there were a couple points there that we maybe could have had or really want back. And like you said, it's not gonna be life or death right now. It's not gonna end the season right now.
No.
But it's crazy to say, but like you said, we're only a couple days from 2024 now. March comes up quick. We only got a couple games in the month of April, and then we're on to playoffs. So this season really, really does fly by. And, capitalizing on as many points and as many wins as possible is going to start paying dividends.
Well, yeah, and it's more so a trend that you don't want to see continue. Because if you lose 4 overtime games in a season, that's fairly standard, I would say. But if you were to keep losing, keep dropping points, and there's some teams last year that finished with upwards of 8-9 overtime losses, and that's their season right there.
Yeah.
You missed because you couldn't get enough points when they were available to you. So Florida certainly does not want to allow that trend to continue, especially also back-to-back weeks on a Saturday night where the Blades lose in overtime in the first 30 seconds of OT on the first chance. That's something that also is going to be looked at hard by the coaching staff, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was like the old NFL rules. If you won the coin toss and the offense got the ball first, it was like, well, all right. Okay. Yeah, it's like the Blades didn't even really get a chance to retaliate after that. So
yeah,
that's just it's a really obviously it's an unfortunate to lose the game, but to lose a game in that fashion is a little bitter.
Yeah, and it also hurts because we talked about it last week when we had Ernie Hartlieb on. 3 out of 6 points on the road is not a bad week.
No.
3 out of 6 points at home doesn't feel as good.
Yeah, you're always going to be asking for more on that one.
Yeah, but it's up to the team. We've still got another 6 games to go before we get to the Christmas break.
Plenty of hockey.
We got 2 games against Orlando at home, then a game on the road against the Solar Bears this week, and then next week. The Solar Bears game actually is the start of a 4-game road trip, 4 games in 4 different cities. So because we're not going to have a podcast next week, Will, we're going to talk all about all of that. But first, we got a special guest today, and it's someone we've been looking to have on for a while.
Sure is.
Schedule conflicts, all that good stuff. Some things have pushed it back, but we're pleased to have Anthony Peters, the assistant coach of the Florida Everblades and former Everblades goaltender, joining us today. That's coming up after this as Swamp Talk continues. Well, it's taken us a little bit of time, but pleased to finally be joined on Swamp Talk by the assistant coach of the Florida Everblades, Anthony Peters. Coach, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate it, Coach.
Yeah.
How you doing?
So we're about 20 games now into your first season as a coach at any level, coming out of retirement from your goaltending playing days into being a coach. What surprised you the most about the transition from playing to coaching?
That's a great question. I think just there's so much to learn. Obviously, I play goalie, so I had to learn the position in a different way. As a goalie, you kind of see the game a certain way. You have a different view than most guys, I guess. But just trying to learn the defensemen, guys on the penalty kill, like their thought process, what it's like for them. Just early on talking to a lot of former teammates, former coaches, trying to get feedback from the guys on the team, just coming in with an open mind and trying to work my butt off and help the guys the best that I can.
And you always come in with a positive attitude. There's sometimes people talk about that the assistant coach has to kind of sometimes be the good cop to the head coach's bad cop. So working with Coach Ralph, and sometimes when he's talking to the team in a certain way, how do you feel you have to go talk to the team in a different way to sort of get the point across?
So you're saying that Ralphie's a bad cop?
Oh, sometimes he can be. He can be.
You're lucky we already had him on the show.
Yes, we did.
He wouldn't be coming back if he heard this.
No, he would not.
Yeah, for sure. There's that's part of the job, right? Is to be that buffer between the head coach and the players, and just be a voice. They can come to me if they need to come to me about something or to try to get the message through a different way. but I think for the most part, like Ralphie does a really good job how he handles it, and especially kind of with the game now, you can't really be too much of a bad cop. It's guys are very intelligent, and it's just the way it is. And Ralphie's got a really good feel on the room, so there's not really too often where I kind of have to do that. But just as a rule, just another voice of kind of saying his message. And sometimes, it's getting some feedback from the guys, and I can take it to him. But he's great at that.
And expand on that a little bit, because you played under Coach Ralph.
Yep.
It's obviously very different when you're across from him in the office, on the bench with him in the suit. So what's it been like compared to your playing days here when you were a goaltender? What's it been like now being on the bench with him?
Yeah, so as a player, you have no idea like what goes into it. I knew he was a passionate guy, loves the game, loves to win, wants to win so bad. So I think as a player, it's you always want to play for guys like that. I think it's not just, hey, we lost. It's like he really wants to win, and he'll do anything he can to help the team win. And it's not he doesn't have a big ego where it's like his way. I can come up with ideas, and he's open to it. Guys can come with some feedback. Hey, we're seeing this. So it's not like it's just his way or the highway. He wants to win, and he'll listen to everybody. So I think that's awesome. And just being on the other side, it's different. I think just for me, you're used to kind of being in the fight, and if the game's on the line, you can do something. Now it's like you're trying to motivate guys or help guys or put them into positions to succeed. So it's a little different. Sometimes you wish you could be out there, but it's just different. But it's been great. I've enjoyed it a lot.
And kind of going back to what Jake was saying a little earlier, making the adjustment from being a goalie to a coach now. Do you think being a goalie kind of gives you a slight advantage? Because, I mean, for years and years, you're on the ice for 60 minutes. The whole play's in front of you. You can see everything, especially when it's on the other end. Do you think that just kind of being out there and absorbing all that information, do you think there's a perspective to give the guys that they're usually not seeing?
For sure. You guys, the stereotype goalies are usually the oddball. So I don't know. Every goalie would make a good coach.
I know he's a goalie too.
Yeah, I could tell.
I'm not a coach.
But no, it's for sure. You kind of see the offensive side where guys are shooting on you for so many times. Like over the years, I've given up a million goals or been shot on a million times. So I know what's tough for a goalie. But then you see the other side of the defensive side where it's like when the D do this, it makes my job a little easier. So yeah, you do see both sides of the game. You can give little pointers. I enjoy now doing stuff with the forwards, little details of, when you're in these spots, you can look to pass or look to shoot or how to screen in front, what's difficult, and then same thing defending. But yeah, I think you kind of have both sides. I mean, I'm sure every position has its pros and cons. There's certain things I have no idea about, and then I have to learn about, or as a teammate, you talk to guys about as a player. But yeah, it's for sure some things translate. And
what was the timeline like? I mean, between you kind of figuring that your playing career was kind of coming to an end, and what was it like, and what steps were taken between you hanging up the skates and then putting them back on in a coaching duty?
Yeah, so I would say my second last year playing, I had a pretty bad injury. I missed like 5 months, so I thought I was kind of done then. And I came home and I was rehabbing, and it was basically like if I could play again, it'd be awesome. I was doing everything I could, and then fortunate that I got back to playing, things went well. So then I had another whole year, but it was pretty tough trying to manage the injury. And so it's kind of like I probably could have grinded it out if I really needed to, but I was in a position where, I could still walk and move and live properly. And that's something that I kind of was in the forefront. So I just kind of wrestled with that a little bit. I knew I was passionate about coaching. I do a lot of stuff in the summers over the years, so I knew I wanted to get into it. My brother's a coach. Some of my former teammates are coaches, so I talk a lot to them. And I knew there was certain aspects of the job that are tough, and things I had no idea that I didn't even know. So there's that side of it too. But yeah, something I knew. I would say for 5 years, probably my last 5 years of playing, that I wanted to get into a coaching someday. And then I would say the last year or two, it was kind of like, how am I going to time it? The job opportunity was here, and it's like, okay, I could, do this for another year or two, or I could just jump right in. And it's kind of what I decided to do.
And I mean, was it kind of just like a stroke of luck that a team that you had formerly played for, the assistant coaching job kind of opened up, or were there any kind of back and forth dialogue with you and Coach Ralph? I mean, just how did the whole you getting this position even develop?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's I just kind of reached out to the team, or talked to Brushy once and just asked him a couple questions about coaching at this level, just not to be here, but just at the level. Interviewed some different spots or had some different positions at different levels. And then they called and asked about this position. And at first I was kind of like, well, I was goalie. I don't know if that was, I was kind of on the fence about it. And then, I talked to some people and thought about it. And I was just like, why, like, what a great opportunity. And I think at first it was kind of the fear thing of why I shied away from being an assistant coach, just a lot of unknown, out of your comfort zone, and then kind of had to look myself in the mirror and say, what a great opportunity, what a challenge. And right. I'm so glad I did. It's been a lot of fun, and there's a little bit of back and forth, and I think being here before, having the familiarity probably for him with me, and Mr. Brush with myself, but also then my side of it is, I was here. I knew how great of an organization it was. I knew how great the staff is, how first class they are, and I knew the type of person that Brad was as like a human being, and then secondly, I knew how great of a coach he was, and the success speaks for itself. But you put a lot of hours in the office with the guy, and to see, how he's a family man first, and his passion to win, it's checks a lot of boxes. So it was pretty easy after I got out of my own way that it was like, I'm all in.
Awesome.
Well, the team seems to really like having you here. And 20 games in, above a 500 record, in the middle of the South Division standings right now. It's going to be a very, very competitive division all the way through. What are your thoughts on this team's performance thus far and what they need to do to keep improving and try and three-peat?
Yeah, I think it's fun to talk about a three-peat, right? That's the standard, the expectation, because the organization is done so well. But it's like, what got them 2 championships? A lot of work, a lot of great players, a lot of details and things that aren't necessarily sexy or you don't see all the time, but it's, there's a lot that goes into it. So to me, I'm more about the details, the process of how you get that. And I think we show it at times, for sure, it's there. But I also think that, like, that's something we struggle with. The little details, whether it's stopping on pucks or going to the net or doing things with a purpose. So I think that's the standard for us, and we struggle at times having that. There's been a lot of unbelievable individual efforts. There's a lot of great work ethic. Guys are working hard. But yeah, it's that standard of those details that come and go. And I think if that's there every day for our group in practice or in games, then your talent takes care of it, or the scores kind of take care of themselves.
And for your career personally, you've obviously, you played here in Florida, you played in other parts of the U.S. and Canada, but you also have a pretty extensive international career, just playing overseas. What was that whole experience like? What was that transition like? And just kind of, going from, the Canada and the U.S., where you're pretty familiar with everything, speak the language, obviously, but then shifting that and going over to Europe just must have been a totally new horse.
Yeah. It's hard to pinpoint like one thing. I think it's cool. You got, Skoog, he's from Sweden. I can speak some of the language. I can say hi to him or understand what he's going through coming. I mean, obviously he played college here and stuff, but those types of things. And then understand there's different ways of doing things. There's whether it's development, whether it's culture, and just, I guess you could say I would be diversified in that a little bit. But yeah, I don't think there's like one thing that helps you or makes you better. It's just different experiences. And I think as a coach, you just take your experiences of what you've been through and try to take it to the players and help them any way you can. But yeah, it's fun. I can goof around with Cougar sometimes and say some funny words. But yeah, I think the experience of being in different situations and seeing how there are different ways to doing things. And I enjoyed. I had a lot of great memories and great experiences, and also was on the other end of, how not to probably treat players, how not to run an organization, how not to do things. So yeah, saw both sides for sure.
Do you have a favorite European city that you visited or you played in or saw?
I really liked visiting Bratislava. It's a really cool city.
Oh, yeah.
Living there was awesome. It was close, so we could go to Budapest. So I went to Budapest. Been to London. Like I've been, there you're a 2-hour train ride or, $40 flight somewhere. It's pretty cool. Everything's so close. So yeah, I'd say living in Bratislava and being there at first as a visitor and then playing there and living there. And then I would say my favorite city was probably Budapest that I've been to. It's a lot of history and pretty cool spot.
Yeah, good place to play some hockey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What was your biggest biggest culture shock moment where you're just like, whoa, this is way different than back home?
Mayo on French fries.
Yeah. I would say when I first went to Europe, I went to Germany, and I was in a smaller town. So a lot of the big cities, there's a lot of tourism, so there's a lot of English, and where I was, there wasn't a lot of it. So I was trying to learn how to say, like, I can't speak German. But what I was saying is that I can speak German. So I was trying to tell them, but I was just saying I can. So they're like, okay, well, you can speak German, cool. So that was tough. But yeah, just basically that.
Eventually figure that out.
Yeah. So going to the grocery store, you got to translate everything. You have to learn. And then once you do it a couple of times, you kind of order the same food and stuff. But yeah, when you're on your own, going to a grocery store in a new country, trying to eat, as an athlete, healthy and stuff, it took some time, but it was funny.
So were you trying to get directions or something? You said like ich spreche Deutsch. And,
I was trying to say like, hey, I can't speak German. Try to make hand gestures, try to order some food, things like that. But I just kept saying sprechen Sie Deutsch.
Oh no.
So yeah, it was took a bit.
Yeah.
Took a bit.
Got to get the whatever the word for no is, or I don't know. You would know better than I.
Niche. Sprechen. I can't even remember right now. That's probably why I didn't have it.
You brush up on the German.
Sprechen kein Deutsch, something.
No, we had Kalbla here last year, the German.
Yeah.
If he could have stuck around, he would have been helpful for you.
For sure.
The outlook on the season, though, I mean, you're coming into this not only as a player but as a new coach, to come into an organization that is, kind of dating back to what you said, and just the level of leadership and everybody here and what they do. And now you're coming into a team that's won back-to-back Kelly Cups. Is that challenging to come into as a first-time coach, to be like, the standard here for the better part of 2 going on 3 years has been win the Kelly Cup? Do you kind of embrace that challenge of being the top dog and one of the top levels of professional hockey in the country?
For sure. I think as an athlete or as a coach, anyone in sport, it's like it's all about winning. You want to win. For me, it's awesome because I get to come in and be beside Ralphie every single day, and he's been there, done that. He's way too good for this level of hockey. So to see him every day, to learn from him every day, it's awesome. And let's be honest, he could run this team by himself. He basically does. So it's just cool for me to pick it up every day to get better. I don't necessarily like that saying, but every day I literally come in and learn something new from him, from the guys. But yeah, it's one thing to come in and just, there's a standard, but then it's my job to live up to that standard. The standard's there. Now the players have to come in and live up to that standard. You don't just come in here and win games. There's a standard for a reason set by ownership, set by Mr. Brush, set by Ralphie, and then former players. Like they raised the bar, and new guys coming in. It's you don't just come in and put the sweater on and it doesn't happen. You got to come in and execute and put in the work. That there's been a lot of great players come through here, and they were here for a while for a reason because of the standard that they played to. So it just takes time. You got a lot of new guys. You got to teach them the standard, learn the culture, and then through that process, the results take care of themselves.
And you briefly alluded to it earlier, and it's something you've experienced in your long hockey career, playing for teams that don't have that same standard, where they're not always vying for a championship. Not every little thing is about living up to that standard. So talk a little bit about what the difference is like in a locker room, like here with the Blades, where everything is about the highest standard possible and reaching for the top, versus one where it just isn't.
To be honest, I think it always starts at the top of an organization. It's, say, ownership. If you don't have a good owner, then it bleeds into management. It bleeds into the coaches. And here it's obviously, first-class ownership. And then Mr. Brush, how he's been here since day one, and they've had success forever. He's seen it all, and he does things the right way. Oftentimes, there might be shortcuts in organizations. I've seen it. Guys not getting paychecks. How do you expect a guy to want to play for your team when you're not getting paid? Or, whatever it is. But it certainly starts at the top. Wanting to play for the team, you appreciate the organization, you appreciate the team. And then, it kind of just trickles down through everybody. So, yeah, to me, any organization I've been to that's had struggles, it starts at the top. So, yeah, I would say that would be the nail on the head for me.
I talked to a couple of weeks ago after one of our games. I talked to Evan Cormier in the Hertz #1 club, and I asked about your relationship with him and just kind of as having for the goalies for Cam and Evan, having not just a goalie coach, but having somebody that is very high up in the coaching chain, an assistant coach in this instance, be a former goalie, and to kind of have the ability to give them pointers and always have somebody to kind of bounce ideas off of. And we see, after practices, very often you're working, one-on-one with Evan or Cam or the two of them, especially, if the team is doing something skating specific. So to have that kind of resource for them, and I think it's fair to say that when we got Cam and Evan here, it's probably the best, if it's almost inarguably the best goalie tandem in the entire league. Mm-hmm. So to kind of have that resource for them, do you think that's helped them out?
I mean, for sure. I also think that either guys had a lot of success without me, and they're great on their own. So it's like, hey, I'm not going to come in and change your game or do anything. I'm just going to come in and respect you. What are your needs? What do you want? What do you think makes you successful? And then try to help facilitate that, whether it's through drills, whether it's, before ice, after ice, or, this is what makes them feel good in a game. Okay, so how do we get there? What does that look like? So just kind of help kind of the day-to-day for that. But yeah, it's been awesome working with them. They're both awesome guys. Obviously, Cam's been here, and you hear the fans cheer for him. He's a fan favorite, and rightfully so. He's had a lot of great years here. So just trying to help him manage his game and then hold him to that standard every day. So it's been a lot of fun, and same with Evan. He's came in and done an amazing job, and he got called up briefly there. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'm learning from them at the same time. So it's I've really enjoyed that.
And then finally, this being your first year as a coach, we know what the team's goals are. They want to win the Kelly Cup at the three-peat. For you, looking back in this year, 5 years, 10 years, however long from now, what do you want to have happen for you personally that would make you look at this year as a resounding success?
It's a deep question, Jake. That's a good question.
That's why we saved it for last.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm just trying to learn as much as I can and provide as much value as I can. Whether that's, it sounds funny, whether it's just being there for guys, whether it's picking up pucks, whether it's knowing my stuff and being able to help guys. It's just working as hard as I can, learning as much as I can, and I don't really gauge it on like wins and losses or championships and things like that. I think there's just a standard that I would hold myself to, and try to help pick up everyone around me and help them live up to their standard or live into their potential. I think I don't know how you would gauge it, but I think just being passionate and helping guys and treating guys with respect the best that I can, and picking up as much knowledge on the way.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Coach. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Coach Anthony Peters, the assistant coach of the Florida Everblades, on Swamp Talk.
Thanks, Will.
Swamp Talk continuing on after this.
Thank you so much, assistant coach Anthony Peters, for joining us on Swamp Talk and kind of giving us a little bit of a German lesson. I took a tiny little bit of German like 5 years ago, so that's probably why I was terrible, and I actually don't know much German, and that's probably why I said that sentence incorrectly. But hey, good to get his story.
Yeah, good to try it. At least he could speak it. I am very unilingual. Yeah. And also, he said he could. We didn't have him say anything, but he speaks a little bit of Swedish with Skog.
Yeah.
So, man of the world, Anthony Peters. Very glad to have him joining us on the podcast today, and we'll be joining him for 6 Everblades games over the next 2 weeks. So we got the two. Let's start with the two home games. The last two home games before Christmas. Friday, December 15th and Saturday, December 16th, both against the Orlando Solar Bears. It's been a while since we've seen them, but it's already the 7th and 8th meeting of the year against Orlando. Blades have so far this year in the meetings against Orlando, they've won 4 out of the 6 so far, but the only 2 losses were at home.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the Blades really had the Solar Bears' number at the Amway Center, so that was kind of a little surprising to see them come into Hertz Arena and take 2 wins out of there. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. We've seen Orlando a whole lot this season, and the Everblades have certainly seen Orlando a lot this season. So it's going to be two teams that are familiar with each other, that there's, maybe a little bit of elbow brushing going on. So it should be a very physical matchup. And it's going to be a matchup that's, against 2 teams that know what to expect and know the other team's kind of tendencies. So that always makes for good hockey. It makes for exciting hockey. It makes for really dynamic games. So I'm excited for these 2 matchups coming up.
Oh, me too, for sure. And it also is 2 teams that are very close in the standings right now, which adds that little extra.
These games mean a lot.
But there's also a third one. That one's going to be up at the Amway Center. It's Sunday, December 17th at 6 o'clock. Mm-hmm. That one's going to be a little bit interesting because it's going to be the third game in 3 nights for both teams having to travel after that one, right? Blades will be doing an up and back for that game. So it always is interesting, the third game of a 3-3. We've seen that once with Greenville. Florida won a bit of an ugly game, 5-4 against the Swamp Rabbits. So I don't even know if you can really talk about the prep for that one because, well, the teams will be very familiar with each other going into that game. But it's also going to be the third game in 3 days. For South Carolina, Orlando, it's going to be their 4th game of the week because the Solar Bears actually play the Stingrays on Tuesday at home. So it's going to be 2 teams where energy management is going to be big. It's also going to be the first time this season the Blades are actually playing Orlando in Orlando on a weekend, which will be interesting to see how the crowd shows compared to the Thursday night, Wednesday night games the Blades have played at the Amway Center previously. And then also, though, that game is the first game of a 4-game road swing for Florida going into the Christmas break.
Yeah, so there's a lot of...
Very quickly, just before you go into your talk, we already talked about Orlando Saturday, and then you got Jacksonville next Wednesday. Then you're in Savannah for the first meeting of the season against the Ghost Pirates, and then they wrap it up with another bout against the South Carolina Stingrays on Saturday, December 23rd, last game before the Christmas holidays.
So you got 4 games against 4 different teams. They really start, starting to feel like an NHL kind of schedule. No longer playing 2 or 3 game series. But you're absolutely right. Going back to that away game in Orlando, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're looking at a situation that is you're looking at a multitude of situations for the Everblades that are very rare. You're playing a Sunday game, which doesn't happen very often. They've only had 1 Sunday game this year going into that contest.
A win. That's actually the 5-4 win against Greenville that I alluded to earlier.
Yeah. So, I mean, the precedent for Sunday games is good for the Everblades. It's a Sunday game. You don't always play those. It's a road game against Orlando, which have gone well for the Blades so far this season. But it's on the weekend, which hasn't happened this season.
And it's coming on the back of 2 home games, which I know home games should benefit the Blades, but playing 2 games and then going in to play a third is tough on anyone.
3 straight games, period, is tough. And then to mix it in 3 straight games and a 3-hour bus ride up there is that's a whole nother factor.
I hope it's only 3 hours up to Orlando.
The traffic can be ridiculous. Don't even get me started on that I-4 I-75 change. I'm not from here, but boy, did I figure that out fast.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, this is going to be a really dense stretch of hockey, and I was going to say it, but you brought it up first. But load management is going to be absolutely massive, and it's going to be a tough balance to strike because the Orlando Solar Bears are not a team that you can glide against. You have to skate hard every shift. You have to, be very serious when you take on this team, especially seeing how close they are in the standings. These are going to be crucial games, but you got to reconcile the fact that you're playing 3 games back to back to back, so you can't go crazy on Friday, Saturday, and then leave nothing in the tank for Sunday.
Yeah, and also we should mention for load management. We don't mean like the NBA style where LeBron's sitting out a random Tuesday in Oklahoma City. We mean more so the coaching staff, and I hate talking like I know what I'm talking about with the coaching when I say this, but I think it's going to be important to look at on that Sunday game in particular. Maybe if a guy is a step behind who's normally good, but a guy further down in your lineup has more energy because he hasn't played as much over the past 2 games, maybe he gets a little more ice time in that game just because he has a little more to offer in that game.
I think if you were to pan out and plot the amount of time, the amount of ice time that the lines were going to get, I think it would, at the end of this weekend, after that Sunday game in Orlando, it would show to be a pretty even split between, you know, first line getting X amount of shifts and second and third and fourth, because you're going to need that. You're going to need, you're probably going to need, especially on that Sunday game. Again, I don't like talking like I know what I'm talking about, but you're probably most like, if I had to take a shot in the dark, I would say you're probably going to see 4 complete forward lines, 12 forward skaters, just to make sure you're spreading out and not, skating anybody too hard.
Well, it'll depend on the back end. It'll obviously depend on injuries. Blades do have a couple guys banged up. Would be great to see some of them come back.
Very true.
Saw, and so last week, who knows, with the AHL with the Charlotte Checkers, we had Cam Morrison for the game on Wednesday,
Didn't
the game
have
on
him
Friday, and then for Teddy Bartos night, he gets called up back to the American Hockey League. So who knows, that could either benefit or burn the Blades. But that's just life in the ECHL, right? And tough South Division hockey, that's just life in this division, right? Like there's no easy nights in the South Division, and after that series against Adirondack, we don't see another non-divisional opponent until February. And then after 6 games there, that'll all be at home against Adirondack and the Worcester Railers. It's all South Division for the rest of the season.
I mean, this is really truly the gauntlet of the season. I alluded to it in the segment before we had Anthony Peters on, but don't get stuck in your head that it's mid-December. The playoffs are X amount of months away. I mean, April will be here very soon. So the South Division is always so tough. The games mean that much more. The closer you get down to it, but the mindset has to be, we just got to dominate everybody from whistle to whistle.
And the 12 points available from this stretch now to the Christmas break are just as valuable as the 12 points that are in those 6 games in April.
No doubt.
So you can't afford to. Not that I don't think the team ever was. I don't think the team ever has. I don't think in any game this year there's been one where I've even remotely thought the team took the night off.
No.
But what I'm more so saying is just that you almost have to treat it. It was Paul Maurice, the head coach of the Florida Panthers, our NHL affiliate, who talked about it when the Panthers a few weeks ago went up on a road trip against Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto, a 3-game set against divisional opponents. The team went into it treating it like a playoff week because of how valuable those points are.
Yeah.
And I know that seems a little crazy maybe to treat every single week as a playoff week basically for Florida, but with how competitive the South Division is, you kind of have to. If you go into the Blades locker room, they have the standings up for the South and the North Division. The contrast is very stark. The North Division has a significant divide between the top 4 teams and the bottom 3. Right now Greenville's a step ahead of everyone in the South Division. Everything else is a giant mix-up.
You look at these standings, and one weekend, the Everblades could be in second place in the division, and then one weekend passes, and they could be below the playoff line.
I think the Blades, they shifted from 6th to 3rd over the past week, and could very easily shift all over. And like Greenville, as I said, they are separating themselves a little bit right now.
They're pulling ahead.
Not so much that you're like they're in. Don't worry about them.
Right.
But what that would mean, if they can continue on their torrid pace and they can continue to separate themselves more and more, then all of a sudden you're not competing for one of 4 playoff spots. You're competing for one of 3.
Yeah, and then the real estate, the real estate just becomes that much more contested.
I mean, we saw it last year. Florida was competing for the division until all of a sudden they started to slip towards the end of the year, and then all of a sudden Florida was just looking to hold on to that last spot. Changed the whole feel of those weeks in late March and early April. It was tense around here.
Yeah, and I of course came in. I started with the team right around Labor Day this year, but I heard stories about that March of 2020, late February or not 2020. February
March
and
2020 wasn't fun either, but that was
that was pretty bad from what I
reasons.
remember. I had to go home on my freshman year of college, but February and March of last year, or I guess this year, 2023. I'm getting all jumbled up here. February and March of this past year, 2023, was like white knuckle holding on to that playoff spot, and it wasn't. It may have gotten your heart racing, but it wasn't a comfortable place to be. So you really got to start separating.
And the team doesn't want to do that again this year.
No. And then that goes back into we're getting really ahead of ourselves. But if it does get that close down the stretch in February and March and early April, and you got to really push just to get in the playoffs, and then the playoffs happen, and you've got a whole nother mountain to climb after just grinding to get there in the first place.
And with all of that, you don't want to be looking back on this 2-week stretch coming up where you play a bunch of your South Division rivals. You're playing in tough scenarios, a 3-3 mixed in with a 4-game road trip.
Yep.
Like it is
against four different teams.
Against 4 different teams, 4 different cities. Three of those games coming in 4 different nights. It is a very tough stretch of hockey right now for the Florida Everblades. And you want to be able to look back on this stretch and say, this was a time where our team really came together and got some big wins and moved ourselves up the standing. It was the start of something special. You don't want to be the team. There's always teams in the ECHL every year that look back, and you can look back on a 2-week swing where we let that go, and now we're watching playoff hockey from our couches instead of actually being at Hertz Arena.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for the Blades. You're playing over the course of the next week and a half. Starting from, or I guess I should say 2 weeks, you're playing all but 2 teams in the division.
Yeah.
You're playing Orlando, Jacksonville, Savannah for the first time, South Carolina, and Orlando. Or I already said Orlando.
Yeah, no, you got them all. You got the 4 of them.
So I got the 4 of them. But and this is going to be really good because other than Greenville, who you're not playing in the series, and Atlanta, who you're not playing in the series, but you'll see plenty of them going down the year.
They're your first opponent in the new year.
Haven't played Jacksonville too much. Have never even seen Savannah. You really have only had a couple of games against the Stingrays and Orlando. You've seen a gajillion times by now. But especially, I'm really looking at that Jacksonville and the Savannah games. These are 2 teams that, for the Jacksonville instance, they're 2 teams that have played each other. They haven't played each other too much. So there's still a lot to learn about the Icemen and what they can do and their capabilities. But, that goes both ways. They're still learning about the Everblades.
And then Savannah,
you haven't seen anybody. So that's a golden opportunity to jump out, give Savannah all you've got, and take 3 points that night.
Yeah, and I don't think, 2 points.
2 points, excuse me.
If you can take 3, if they can find a way to take 3 points,
they should really try
to do that. But I don't think you can. I don't know if I would call Savannah a statement game at all, because even though they're playing better hockey recently, they're still 6th in the division. They were 7th last year by quite a bit. You're not making a statement against a team that didn't make the playoffs last year. Isn't much of a statement. But it's a game where you want to show your best because you're playing someone for the first time this year, and you want to show, we're still the class of this division. We're still the back-to-back champions that you remember playing last year and getting beat down a number of times by the Blades.
Yeah.
And Market Arena is an awesome venue, so I'm looking forward to that game next Friday. But this is still very much, just want to clarify some of my previous comments, this Blades team still very much a playoff caliber team, absolutely. When they are at their best, like they were on Friday, they are a championship caliber team. And that's the expectations that they have. It's just the good hockey, the great hockey that the Blades are capable of playing. We've seen it a lot this season.
Yep.
We just need to see it game after game after game, because that's when Florida can start rolling.
And they'll have the opportunity to roll with a couple of big games at home coming up this weekend, December 15th and 16th at home here at Hertz Arena against the Orlando Solar Bears. And then a big old road swing to cap off the pre-Christmas schedule. So a lot of good hockey, Jake, coming up, and a lot of opportunities to take some wins.
Yeah, and there will also be some games against Greenville after the Christmas break, 2 at home, 1 on the road. Same deal with Orlando, but not a 3-3. We'll be talking about those games when we're next on Swamp Talk.
Wow.
Will. It's gonna be a while. Holidays, you got to spend some time with family, right? We can't live together. Will, you got to get back to Massachusetts, see everybody. Home. I gotta go across Alligator Alley, visit my parents. It's gonna be a really fun holiday break, but in the meantime, we're going to get to enjoy some Everblades hockey, even though we'll be apart from our listeners who we value so much. So here in the final episode of Swamp Talk in 2023, thank you very much. We wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, and we're thankful to have you with us. And we can't wait to be with you again in the new year when we're back again for more Swamp Talk.